Welcome to today's deep dive. If you are listening to this, odds are, well, you are already pretty familiar with AI.
Right, you are probably not a total novice anymore.
Exactly. You know your way around a prompt box. You use it to draft the occasional email or summarize a long document, and you probably feel like you have a decent handle on things.
Which is a great start.
It is, but if we are being completely honest, a lot of us have hit a bit of a plateau recently. We are getting competent results, but we are still fundamentally interacting with these models the same way we interacted with a search engine a decade ago.
Yeah, the old 2005 Google search bar mentality.
Precisely. We ask a question, we take the first decent answer, and we just move on with our day.
And honestly, it is a very common place to get stuck. I mean, you graduate from being a total beginner, but you haven't yet crossed the threshold into becoming a true power user. And there is a massive difference
It's
there.
a huge difference.
Right now, there is a quiet fraction of users, the top 1%, who are essentially operating in a completely different reality. They aren't just getting slightly faster at their jobs. They are multiplying their output quality tenfold.
Tenfold. That's wild.
And they're doing it while actually doing, 50% less manual work.
And that brings us to our mission for today. Today is March 3rd, 2026, and we are looking at a highly practical guide from AI Fire.
Oh, this is a great piece.
It really is. It is an article by Max Ann titled 9 Essential AI Skills to Master in 2026, The Pro Guide. The goal of this deep dive isn't to rehash the absolute basics. Our mission is to walk you through the exact 9-skill stack that separates the casual everyday users from that top 1%.
We are going to look at the systems, the framework.
Those mental shifts.
Basically, the mental shifts required to actually control these tools rather than just reacting to whatever they spit out.
Okay, let's unpack this. The guide breaks this journey down into a few distinct phases, starting with what we can call the foundations of control. And it all begins with how we actually structure our requests.
Right, because even though we are moving past the beginner stuff, we still have to acknowledge the absolute bedrock of computing, which is
Garbage in, garbage out.
garbage in, garbage out. It applies heavily to AI. But the way power users handle their inputs is highly structured. The article outlines a 4-component framework that works across virtually every major model right now. You don't just type a paragraph and hope for the best. You give the model a role, a context, a command, and a format.
I found the example Max used in the guide really helpful for visualizing this. Instead of just jumping in and saying something generic like, write some emails for my business, you start by assigning a very specific identity.
You have to give it a persona.
Yes, you tell the model, act as a senior copywriter with 15 years of direct response experience.
That is the role component, and it is crucial. It immediately narrows the model's vast, generalized knowledge base down to a highly specialized lane. You are basically telling it which specific vocabulary and pacing to use.
But the role alone isn't quite enough, is it?
No, it is not. Next, you have to provide the context. This is where you map out your exact current situation. The example in the guide uses a scenario where you explain that you run a B2B SaaS company and you are specifically targeting HR managers at firms with 200 to 500 employees.
Which is incredibly specific. You aren't just targeting businesses in general. You are targeting mid-market HR managers.
Exactly. Then you move to the command, which is the actual task. You tell it to write 10 cold email subject lines.
And finally, the format. Instructing it to return the output as a numbered list with a strict maximum of 10 words per line.
That final formatting constraint is where people save so much time. When you tightly control the structure of the output, you completely eliminate the need to manually reformat everything the AI gives you.
It just comes out ready to use.
It's exactly. But perhaps the most valuable takeaway from this first section of the guide is what Max calls the pro trick for prompting.
Oh, right, the style matching trick. The idea here is that if you already have a document, maybe a blog post or a report that perfectly represents the tone and quality you're looking for.
You don't need to spend 20 minutes trying to describe that tone to the AI.
Right. You just upload the document and explicitly tell the model, match this style exactly.
It is an incredibly elegant solution because it leans into what these models actually are. They are, at their core, sophisticated pattern recognition engines.
So they don't have to guess what you mean by words like professional or engaging.
No guessing at all. When you give them a concrete pattern of what great looks like, they just map the new information onto the proven pattern you provided. The guide suggests this single habit alone can save users dozens of hours of frustrating trial and error.
But even if you nail that formatting trick and you get back 100 perfectly styled options in 30 seconds, you still run into a very human problem.
Which is?
How do you know which of those options is actually worth keeping? I mean, getting 100 options is easy now. Picking the best two is the hard part. The machine can generate endless variations, but it cannot decide which one is best. That is entirely on you.
Which brings up the next critical skill, cultivating your taste. What's fascinating here is how the guide reframes the entire concept of taste. We tend to think of taste as this mystical, innate talent that certain creative people are just born with.
Like it's magic.
Right. But the reality is that taste is a highly structured, documented, and learnable skill. There is a brilliant quote from Ben Affleck included in the article that perfectly captures this dynamic. He said, "Being a craftsman is knowing how to work, but art is knowing when to stop."
Wow, knowing when to stop.
Yes, that gap, knowing exactly when to stop, knowing which option is the final one, that is where taste lives.
And you don't develop that by just hoping for inspiration to strike. You develop it by actively building a reference library. The guide suggests that whenever you encounter exceptional work out in the wild, you need to capture it.
Build a swipe file.
Exactly. If you are a writer, you should be saving the exact headlines that compel you to stop scrolling. If you are a designer or a product manager, you should be taking screenshots of every user interface that feels intuitively clean to you. You gather these examples and you study them to figure out exactly why they work.
You are essentially training your own neural network at that point. You are building a mental repository of excellence. And the practical application of this for AI is that it forces you to stop using vague adjectives in your poems.
Because when you haven't defined your taste, you end up asking the AI to make things punchy or dynamic.
And the AI has to guess what punchy means to you, which usually results in completely mediocre output.
Exactly. When you have a defined taste library, you can translate those preferences into concrete rules. Instead of asking for something punchy, you can give the AI actual guardrails. You tell it, maximum line length is 100 characters, you must start with a reframe, and you must end with a consequence.
You start paying attention to the heavy lifting that specific words do. The guide points out a great example of this, the words leader and boss.
Oh, that was a great distinction.
In casual human conversation, we might use those interchangeably. But to an AI, those two words map to entirely different semantic associations and will pull your output in noticeably different directions. Boss is authoritative, maybe slightly negative. Leader is inspirational.
So the move for the top 1% is to document these specific rules and constraints into a personal style guide. Once you have your own clear definitions of quality written down, you just feed those parameters into the model every single time.
It creates a baseline of consistency that you simply cannot achieve by flying by the seat of your pants.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because feeding those preferences in every single time sounds exhausting if you have to type it out manually.
It would be a nightmare.
Which introduces the concept of the master prompt. Think about the friction of starting a brand new chat window. The AI is a blank slate. It has no idea what your company does, what your specific role is, what your goals are, or what constraints you operate under. If you don't want to start from zero every day, you need a digital ID.
The master prompt functions exactly like that digital ID. It is a comprehensive document that contains all the necessary context about who you are and how you work. You upload it at the very beginning of any meaningful session to instantly bring the model up to speed.
But the actual method for creating this document is very clever. You do not just sit down and try to write a comprehensive autobiography of your professional life. That would take forever.
Instead, you prompt the AI to interview you.
You essentially turn the model into an investigative journalist. You tell it to ask you a series of questions about your business, your target audience, your tone preferences, and your current projects.
And rather than typing out perfectly polished answers, the guide recommends just using voice-to-text. You can just walk around your office and brain dump all your raw, messy thoughts. You let the AI do the heavy lifting of synthesizing all that spoken rambling into a clean, tightly structured master prompt.
It completely removes all the friction from the process. But there is a crucial technical detail here that determines whether this actually works long term. Once the AI generates that perfect summary of your professional context, you have to export it and save it as a PDF.
Yes. The PDF format is non-negotiable here.
I noticed Max specifically insisted on the PDF format in the guide. Why a PDF instead of just pasting it into the custom instructions setting that most of these platforms already have built in?
Because a PDF gives you ultimate portability. If you rely on the internal settings of one specific platform, you are completely locked into their ecosystem. But a PDF travels with you. Whether you're using ChatGPT today, Claude tomorrow, Gemini the next day, or some entirely new model that drops next year, your master prompt is universally readable.
That makes total sense.
The guide highlights an incredible case study of a business that rolled this out across their entire staff. By simply having every employee build and use their own personalized PDF master prompt, over 90% of the team's daily tasks became AI-supported within just a few months.
Wow. Over 90%.
It created total alignment without requiring any complex software integrations.
That is a brilliant way to scale leverage across a team. And that really transitions us perfectly into the next major phase of the guide, which is all about how we shape the actual output and challenge our own assumptions. And the core skill here is output iteration.
Iteration is everything.
I have to bring up the Coca-Cola example from the article because the numbers are just staggering. Coca-Cola produced a single Christmas commercial using AI, and it took them 70,000 prompts to get the final result.
70,000.
And that was generated by just 5 specialists. 70,000 prompts for one single piece of media.
When you really sit with that number, it completely shatters the way most of us think about interacting with these models. The average user types in 2, maybe 3 prompts, looks at the mediocre result, and concludes that the technology just isn't quite there yet.
They treat the AI like a vending machine. You put a coin in, you expect a finished product to drop out.
But the professionals pushing out 70,000 prompts understand that the AI is an iterative engine. The very first response you get is never the final product. It is just raw clay. It is material that exists purely to be pushed, pulled, and refined.
So the practical takeaway is how we actually manage that iteration. You start by uploading your master prompt to ground the context. But when the first draft comes back and it isn't quite right, you don't just say, make it better. You have to be aggressively precise with your feedback.
Yes, highly specific directional commands.
The guide suggests giving commands like, open with a reframe that challenges the underlying assumption that this process is necessary. The first sentence needs to feel like a gut punch to an industry veteran who has been doing this wrong for a decade.
You are giving the model an exact target to hit. Another highly effective tactical move is to always force the AI to generate a structural outline before you ever allow it to write a full draft. This saves an enormous amount of time.
Because changing direction on an outline is fast.
Exactly. If you realize the narrative direction is wrong on a bulleted outline, you can correct course in 30 seconds. If you wait until it generates a complete 1,500-word draft to realize the angle is wrong, you have to spend an hour trying to untangle and rewrite the piece.
The guide also brings up using features like the Canvas workspace in ChatGPT. This is incredibly practical because instead of regenerating an entire document every time you want to make a tweak, the Canvas lets you highlight just one specific paragraph on the side panel.
Which is a game changer for iteration.
You can rewrite that single section while locking the rest of the structure firmly in place. It stops the AI from accidentally rewriting the parts you already liked.
It gives you surgical control over the document, which leads directly into the next major concept: system prompts. We are living through a profound historical shift right now. For the first time ever, we have a major computing technology that we program using natural, plain language instead of writing code.
Anyone who can string together a coherent sentence is now, technically speaking, a programmer.
But to use this effectively, we need to clearly define the difference between the master prompt we discussed earlier and a system prompt.
Right, the master prompt is all about you. It tells the model who you are and what your context is. The system prompt, on the other hand, tells the model what it is.
It defines the rules the AI must follow.
Exactly. The specific role it needs to adopt, and crucially, the things it is absolutely forbidden from doing.
And the smartest way to build a highly effective system prompt is through reverse engineering. You don't need to stare at a blank screen and try to invent the perfect constructions. You take the absolute best, most successful output you have ever received from an AI, you feed it back into the model, and you ask it to analyze its own work.
That's incredibly smart.
You have it deconstruct the structure, the tone, the pacing, and the implicit constraints that made that specific output so effective.
It essentially extracts its own hidden blueprint. Then you take that blueprint, refine it, and save it as a new PDF tool. The article shares a fantastic example of a team that used this exact method to build what they called a book architect.
I loved that example.
It is a custom GPT that they designed to pull from a specific author's previously published work, internalize their distinct voice, and then draft entirely new book chapters based on any given topic.
Building a tool like that might take an hour or two of focused effort to get the system prompt exactly right. But once it is locked in, it scales that specific expertise indefinitely, saving hundreds of hours of drafting time down the line.
But as you start relying on these customized tools, you run into a very real psychological danger, which brings us to the skill of using AI as a critical sparring partner.
The yes man problem.
Right. By default, the commercial models we use are heavily conditioned by their creators to be agreeable, polite, and validating. They want to be helpful, which usually means they want to agree with your initial premise.
So what does this all mean?
It means that if you just present your plans and ideas to an AI without setting strict boundaries, you are basically operating in an echo chamber. The AI will politely nod along, validate your strategy, and help you execute it. You don't actually uncover your blind spots, you just get much faster at executing a potentially flawed plan.
Precisely. If you want genuine value, you have to actively force the model to push back against you. You do this by explicitly assigning it the role of devil's advocate in your prompt. You instruct it to brutally analyze your logic, tear apart your assumptions, and identify every conceivable reason why your project might fail.
And you cannot let it off the hook with superficial critiques.
Never. When it gives you an objection, you prompt it again, forcing it to dig past the surface-level symptoms to find the foundational structural flaws in your thinking.
Max recommends an uncomfortably direct prompt in the guide that you can use right away. You literally type into the model, "What am I completely blind to right now?"
It is a brilliant prompt because it is designed to provoke discomfort. When you read the response and you feel that sudden twist of defensiveness, that is the exact moment you know the AI has actually done its job.
It is pointing out a vulnerability that you were simply too close to the project to see for yourself.
And the final step of that process is to take those newly discovered blind spots, capture them, and add them to your master prompt so you never make that same structural mistake in future projects.
That is a fantastic way to continuously upgrade your own operating system. All right, let's transition into the final phase of the guide: ecosystem management and continuous learning. As we start managing more complex projects and feeding the AI more data, we run into a major bottleneck.
Context compression.
Yes, context compression. And it is built on a truth that feels completely counterintuitive. Giving an AI too much information actually makes it perform worse.
It is arguably the most common trap power users fall into. We are conditioned to believe that more data always equals better analysis. So people take hundreds of pages of research, transcripts, and financial documents, and they just dump them all into a single massive prompt.
And the model just gets overwhelmed.
Completely. When you do that, the model suffers from attention degradation. The critical signals get completely buried under a mountain of noise. The AI loses the thread of what is actually important, and the outputs become blurry, generic, and largely useless.
The guide illustrates this with a scenario where you have 2 million words of raw transcripts and meeting notes. If you try to force the AI to analyze that entire mountain of text at once, it will fail. You have to aggressively pre-compress that data down to a manageable size, say 200,000 words, before the model can actually provide sharp synthesized insights.
And Max lays out a very clear, deliberate three-step workflow for handling this kind of data compression. First, you paste the massive text in and ask the AI to identify what sections are irrelevant to your specific immediate goal.
Okay, so you ask it what to cut.
Second, and this is the step that most people skip entirely, you review those suggested cuts yourself, and you instruct the AI to compress the text based strictly on the cuts that you approve. You never want to hand over executive decision-making to the AI when it comes to deciding what information matters.
Right, you have to maintain editorial control at all times.
And the third step is the most critical.
Yeah.
Once the AI generates that tight, highly compressed summary document, you take it and you start a brand new, completely fresh conversation. You never continue working inside the overloaded, messy thread where you did the compressing.
A fresh window with clean, focused context is the secret to high-quality outputs, which ties perfectly into the next skill: knowledge-based gardening. If you don't maintain clean environments, your company's AI adoption quickly descends into total chaos.
Without a centralized, organized system, you don't end up with an AI-empowered team. You end up with 12 different employees using 12 completely inconsistent rogue voices. Everyone has their own messy prompt history and conflicting instructions.
The solution is to treat your digital workspace like a garden that requires intentional structure and relentless pruning. The practical application here is establishing clear, unambiguous project folders. You don't name a thread ideas, you name it Q1 marketing campaign launch.
And the guide makes a really profound point about this.
Yeah.
If you cannot name the folder cleanly and specifically, it is a massive red flag that you probably don't actually understand the project cleanly yourself.
It is a great diagnostic tool. Inside those clearly named folders, you store your localized context. You upload your master prompt and those tightly compressed data documents we just talked about. That ensures that every time someone on the team opens a new chat for that project, they are starting from the exact same verified baseline.
You also maintain a central repository where all the specialized system prompts are stored as PDFs, organized by department, sales, operations, product. As the guide so wisely puts it, a messy mind creates messy prompts, and messy prompts guarantee worse outputs.
Clean up your workspace, clean up your thinking. We have arrived at the final skill, and this is where the top 1% really separate themselves. It is personalized learning. The truly elite users don't just view AI as a tool to write emails or format code faster. They view it as an on-demand, infinitely patient, totally free university that they can access at any time.
They use the technology to transform their dead time commuting, walking the dog, doing chores, into an expert-level education. The method here is to prompt the AI to write a comprehensive, deeply researched paper on whatever nuanced topic you need to master.
It could be competitive pricing strategies, behavioral economics, or supply chain logistics. But you instruct the model to write the paper in a narrative, story-driven format.
But there's a very specific formula to make this learning method actually stick. First, you have to give the prompt a strict time or word limit, otherwise the AI will just rail endlessly and lose focus.
And the second rule is fascinating.
The second constraint is you must instruct the AI to write the material at a 7th to 9th grade reading level.
Why that specific level?
That reading level constraint is the absolute sweet spot for audio consumption. If you tell the AI to write at a 5th grade level, the concepts get overly simplified, and the model relies on too many childish metaphors that obscure the technical details. If you ask for a collegiate or 12th grade reading level, the text becomes incredibly dense, full of jargon, and almost impossible to process quickly while you are multitasking.
But the 7th to 9th grade range ensures the language is clear and linear enough to follow effortlessly, but sophisticated enough to retain all the necessary technical depth.
Once the AI generates that perfectly leveled narrative, you just hit the play icon, put your AirPods in, and use the text-to-speech feature to listen to it. Instead of scrolling social media or listening to the same playlist at the gym, you are actively absorbing a custom-built, deep-dive education on a topic that directly impacts your career. The compounding knowledge you gain from that one habit alone gives you an almost unfair advantage over time.
It requires a fundamental shift in how we categorize this technology. It is not a glorified search engine, and it is not just a chatbot. It is a highly malleable, creative operating system. It is designed to help you co-create, to rigorously audit your weaknesses, and to accelerate your learning at whatever depth you choose to pursue.
It is a complete paradigm shift.
To bring all of this together for you, the gap between people who use AI casually to draft a quick memo and those who use it intentionally to scale their expertise is already massive, and it is accelerating every single day. The guide leaves you with some immediate practical homework to get started this weekend.
3 simple steps.
First, take 20 minutes to interview yourself and build your personal master prompt, and make sure you export it as a PDF. Second, the very next time you have to make a strategic business decision, force the AI into the critic role and demand that it finds your blind spots. And third, generate a custom narrative research paper and listen to it during your next workout.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the most empowering takeaway is that absolutely none of the 9 skills we discussed today require a computer science degree or a background in coding. They don't require technical genius. They simply require the willingness to be deliberate and structured about how you communicate with a machine.
It is entirely about intentionality.
It is. But as we embrace all of this incredible leverage, it does leave us with a rather profound question to consider. If AI can perfectly simulate a relentless critic to find our blind spots and flawlessly compress 2 million words of complex human thought down into an easy-to-digest 7th to 9th grade audio lesson, what happens to our own innate intellectual grit? If we rely completely on AI to digest and compress the difficult, dense raw material of life so we can just passively listen at the gym, do we risk losing the essential human muscle of deep comprehension?
That is definitely a heavy thought to chew on as you start implementing these systems. Take this 9 skill stack, start building out your personalized libraries, and stop treating these models like a 2005 search bar. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we will catch you next time.